All right, welcome, Sarah. Thanks so much for joining the Coding with Callie meetup.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I've been really excited about this, just really excited about data in general.
Me too. I
So,
think I'm like excited to have you on because most of the Coding with Callie community is junior developers. And I think a lot of people come from boot camps where it's like full stack web dev. That's the only thing that there is. And so like I love that you're going to bring something new and interesting and a different path that people can take that's still coding and engineering.
yeah, oh my gosh, absolutely. Because I was previously on that, would everything it's just full stack, and then was like, wait, I don't want to do full stack. Actually, I want to do something else. So,
All right. Well, feel free to get started whenever. And do you want people to wait to the end for questions or interrupt you throughout? I'll interrupt you
let's
regardless of your answer, by the way.
sure. Let's do questions at the end if that's
Okay.
cool for most people.
Sounds
Yeah,
good.
let me just figure out how to get it to play in the window because I got some demos. Alrighty, share screen. Alrighty, so hi everyone, welcome to Data 101. What I call is a very, very quick crash course on all things data and kickstarting your own data project. So for those of you who don't know me, which is probably everyone but Callie, hi, I'm Sara. Um, I'm currently doing a software engineering rotation at Moody's, which is kind of funny because I've done pretty much everything except for software engineering, except for like a 6-month stint. And then I've mostly been doing data engineering, which is when I met Callie. And now I'm currently working on a new rotation as a data scientist. Previously, I graduated from Dartmouth about 2 years ago. My full major, kind of a mouthful, it's computer science modified with quantitative social science, which is a super fancy way of just saying it's CS and some data science that I tacked on in literally like the last year and a half of my degree. Um, Fun little thing, I did a senior honors thesis on GPT-3 before ChatGPT came out. So I like to say I thought I was into LLMs before it became super cool because it's like kind of everywhere now. And yeah, very, very enthusiastic about data. I thought about using a professional headshot, but honestly, I feel like this photo here, it's kind of more representative of me and especially how I got into this whole data thing to begin with. So yeah, this session, it's mostly me nerding about data and how I've used it for my interests and hopefully giving you guys some inspiration on how you can do that in your lives. Um, so, going into this session, right, I was kind of vague of like, okay, data 101. So what comes to your mind when you think of data? And, in like the industry, we hear about like things like big data, data science, maybe you think spreadsheets, Excel, your personal data, social media, all of that. Or, in my role, it's data engineering. But I kind of like to, at first too was like this whole ETL pipeline. Do I go through all of this? And I'm like, okay, that's kind of boring though, like no offense. And I like to think instead of like everything is data, and right now with LLMs, a lot of it's like, okay, they're ingesting a lot of
Can you
data.
clarify
Um,
LLM, please?
Oh yeah, large language models. So things like
Thank you.
ChatGPT and what those are powered on. Yeah, good question. um, but yeah, so like everything can be data. And part of what I want to go through today is like how do we actually capture that data and then use that to help us in our coding? And so one instance is like, okay, you see this tweet, which I think is really cute. And it's like, okay, how do we break down this tweet into data? Well, in order to display all of this information, which I think is really cute, there is a JSON underneath the hood, which is a little less cute to look at. But, we have all the information, how many likes, username, et cetera, and it's all kind of rendered in a nice way for us. But how do we build cool stuff with data, actually? And so I want to go back a little bit into how I got into this. Because I started off as your typical CS major doing algorithms, which was CS 31, which was involving a lot of mathematical proofs and stuff. And I was also doing a class about building websites in React. And at the end of those, I was like, I don't like this actually. Shoot, what do I do? Have I spent 2 years like studying something I don't actually like? But computer science is a lot more than just those. And I just want to give a quick shout out to Professor Suresh Vasugi, who kind of helped change this whole trajectory, and Reibu Liu, who was the grad student who helped me with my thesis. And at the time, Professor Vasugi was teaching a class on machine learning. And a lot of that is like, okay, here's a CSV, run it through the model, learn the linear algebra, et cetera, et cetera. But where does the data actually come from? Like, okay, we learn how to use the machine learning models, but like, what do we feed it? Do we just get random CSVs off the internet or something? And his answer to this was making a special course all about data mining, which is what I took and kind of set off this passion, warpath, whatever you want to call it, in me on using data. And at the time, this is during COVID, I was really into a game called Genshin Impact, which made a lot of money during COVID. This is how much it made in 1 month, from September 28th to October 27th, 2020. COVID was a time. And, you know, some of that money in that bar chart might be my money. And I was thinking to myself, okay, how do they make so much money? You know, that's like crazy. And so my hypothesis was, okay, well, in this class, we learned how to get tweets off Twitter. And we also learned sentiment analysis, which is basically you get text and you can kind of rank, okay, is it like a positive text? Is it a neutral text? Is it negative? And I thought, okay, well, what if I take tweets about this game, look at the sentiment analysis, and maybe that tells me, okay, this character is really popular or something. And so that's why people are willing to like spend too much on them. And it resulted in this 15-page paper that I wrote on of just pure like thirst tweets and Genshin and everything. And I was like, wait, this is actually really fun. I really, really like this. And so going back to, okay, how do you build cool stuff with data? Step one is find your question. Don't overthink it. Just find a question of something that you're interested in. In my case, it's Genshin Impact because I'm all about those anime and video games, but this might look like something else for you. And then find your data source that you think is going to answer the question. And you don't have to know for certain if it's going to answer the question or not, but it's a good place to start. And so in my case, my question was, and this was after some refining, does character design and player sentiment influence how much people spend money in Genshin Impact? And in my case, my data source was tweets related to Genshin Impact via Twitter, which I sadly cannot show the live demo of that because the Twitter API is kind of dead, but I can show a segment of that project here. This is honestly the cleanest code segment I ever had because I had to actually turn this in. The Twitter authentication, it's like dead, so it's like fine. But yeah, essentially what I did for this is we created something called a data frame, and it's basically spreadsheets but in Python. And you know, parse through the API, get all that stuff, and what you have is a spreadsheet within Python of text and when it was posted and who the user is. And from there, I had the information here and I went into the sentiment analysis. And I'm not going to go into all of this code and stuff now because I'll be honest, a lot of this now, you can just ask ChatGPT, hey, how do I do sentiment analysis on it? And it will be like, boom, here you go. But I show all this because it's more of, okay, well, I had my data source and then I want to explore that data. And the thing is, going into this project, I didn't really know what else to do aside from those two steps. But if we look at from, you know, the initial scrape to sentiment analysis, I ended up having all of these additional steps here, which I thought were really fun. And that was kind of something that I just built on as I went onto it because I was like, hey, what if we tried hashtags that we didn't consider before? Instead of character names, we got more hashtags. Or what if we looked at users' other tweets and stuff and just kind of added on and on and on until it kind of grew. And then we got to the sentiment analysis. And that's part of the fun of these kind of projects is you can have like, you know, your question and where you want to get the data from, but from there, what that actually looks like to get your answer, there's a lot of exploration in there that I think is really, really fun part of the experience. And so after kind of adding more to the data set, we then gave it the positivity, negativity scores and all of that good stuff.
Did you come up with like the algorithm for like how it picks out positive versus negative, or you're using, I guess I've never heard of sentiment analysis before. And I'm like so intrigued. I know you said I could co-pilot it, but
yeah. So sentiment analysis, it's part of this library called NLTK, which is Natural Language Toolkit. Let me see where I imported it in the code. But it's basically like kind of the backbone of all that cool stuff that ChatGPT and the rest of the chatbots use, where we're really able to break down language into the code. I could go into like a whole other thing on like how NLTK works on tokenizing words and all of that stuff.
I mean, honestly, I feel like you might need to because I really want to know.
Yeah, I mean, the TLDR is when you have, you know, say a sentence or something, the way that the code processes it is it breaks it down into things like tokens. And if you use an AI tool, you might see, oh, it has a token limit or credits or whatever they want to call, because, you know, the more tokens you use, the more words it's taking in, the more words it's putting out. And that kind of adds up over time. But essentially, when we're tokenizing it, we might have something called n-grams. And n-grams, we have bigrams, trigrams, and it's like all these different word combinations. So like, if you were to break out a sentence, you might have generate a set of keywords. And when we're doing things like predictive text, you know, it might be pairing certain words together of like, oh, this word usually comes after this word, and so forth. And when we're getting to sentiment analysis, in this case, the NLTK library has a bunch of words in it already that it is like, oh, this word has a positive sentiment, or this word has a negative sentiment, like if something's good or bad or something, which can lead to some really fun misunderstandings when it's like, oh, you know, this person is so trash, but I still love them. They're like, okay, what does that mean? You know, or if you're analyzing a song lyric and it's like, oh, I never want to let you go, and that's like a good thing, but in this case, it's like, oh, never, that's a bad word, you know? So it's not perfect, but it's kind of like a generalized way of where to start as far as understanding human language.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Okay. Very
yeah.
cool. Sorry. So continue. I understand
Yeah.
more. So thank
Oh
you.
no, these are all really good questions. But yeah, so this was kind of my fun little origin into all of this stuff.
What was
So
the response though? Are we going over the results? I need to know whether
no, because the
characters died.
results, the graphs that I made for this were like in Matplotlib, and they were kind of ugly. So it was more on just, it was the my professor kind of stressed it was more about the process, not the result
Okay.
output.
So we don't know
So
still. Okay.
yeah. Um, but overall, it was a pretty fun experience. And going back to like the data pipeline, this was basically okay. When we were looking at the data, we're extracting it from Twitter, we're transforming it with the sentiment analysis part, and then we're kind of loading it into the graphs that I will not show because they're kind of uggo and yeah, a little cringe looking back on. But that's kind of the whole data process in a nutshell. And in that toolkit, I was using Jupyter and Pandas. So Jupyter, it's the place I just showed it, it's from Google Colab, which is kind of like Google Docs, but for code, which I think is really cool. And then Pandas, which is the Excel spreadsheets for it. So again, going back to finding your question, here's a question that might have been on more people's minds. How do I get a job? Because this is what I was asking myself at the end of junior year.
Okay.
Yeah, after I took this class.
You're hired, Sara.
Which then so I was like, okay, how do I get a job? Which then turned into how do I network better to get a job? Which then turned into who do I network with from my college to get a job? And so again, going back to finding my question, which alumni are working at companies that I would be interested in? And my data source in this case, LinkedIn and a tech company list. And this is where things got kind of crazy because I basically, so actually I'm going to do my whole screen because this is kind of the more, okay, data stuff. So when I was trying to think of different companies I wanted to work at, because again, whole data awakening, I was like, okay, but what companies are there like out there actually? And so I went through like an article. This isn't the exact article, but I kind of recreated it to make sure it worked. This was like an article I saw of like, oh, big data companies to know and stuff. And I was like, okay, cool, I'm going to grab companies from the list. And so in Chrome, there's this handy thing, right, where you can see website elements and all of that good stuff. And what I did was look at all these company names, and I'm like, okay, I want a whole list of all these companies. So how do I do that? Well, in Chrome, I can see, okay, this is an H3 title, and that's where the company name is stored. And by using this library called Beautiful Soup, I'm then able to extract that information into like actual code that I can use. So I used response to get the HTML content, and I used Soup to parse through it. And then I said, okay, Soup, get me all of the H3s and get me the text from all of it and print out the results so I know that I've scraped it correctly. And again, I'll be honest, ever since ChatGPT has been like on the loose, I could just send it the HTML segment and be like, okay, how do I get this part? Because like all the different little soup commands and parsing through the like div onto div onto div, yeah, that's like, you know, that's kind of like more of the tedious work just to get the data that you want. So, whoa, got all these companies, cool. And then I was like, okay, well, the companies I want to work at, I want them to like actually treat me well. Like Moody's treats me pretty well, I would say. And so I pulled up another source, which in this case, it's a Forbes list of all of these companies. And I'm like, okay, I want to get this. How do I get this? Well, this in this case, it's stored as, let me see. If I want to get all of this, this is like Chrome is super handy for this. I know I like mainly use Safari, but I really do like getting to the HTML elements in Chrome. And here it's like, okay, all the data I want, it's stored as a table, which is T-body. So in my code, I import it. I ask to find the T-body. Again, not going to go through all of this because a lot of that heavy lifting can be done by ChatGPT nowadays, which is really nice. But yeah, I get this. It's looking a little funny. I'm like, okay, why is there like remove rank, remove name, and all of that stuff? So, we clean it up.
Remove women.
We can cut out this. Yeah.
Get them out of there.
Remove women, remove minorities. Yeah, that's looking a little weird. And then I was like, okay, yeah, we don't need this. So, clean it up. Boom, here we go. But if we look at this table that I got over here of the Hilton, Cisco, NVIDIA, we look at this table over here, we're like, okay, wait a sec, this doesn't match up. What happened? Because we have Hilton, NVIDIA, America Express, but we're like, where did Cisco come from? Where did, all of this come from? And if we uncheck this, we'll actually see, oh, that's where they're from, because this is adding in this filter of world admire companies, which what metric they use, that's kind of up to them. But the reason why this is happening is when we're using requests to get the link up here, the thing is request is only getting the raw HTML like at the time that it's being called and stuff. And most websites nowadays use JavaScript, right? Like that's kind of like a lot of what's going under the hood. And that's where Selenium comes in handy. And this is where, again, things kind of went from like, okay, this is cool to like, oh, this is really, really cool. And Selenium is basically what an automated test software that you can use to simulate the website and everything. So let me just load it up. Sometimes it takes a little bit
around on your front end for you, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So loading it up, we have the same site again. And now if we were to repeat all of the process, except instead of using requests, we're getting it from the driver source. We run all of that and boom, we get the correct table that we're looking for. Actually, let me run it all real quick. Here we go. Yeah. We're getting the same table that we have. And the really nice thing about this is if I interact with this website, like say I want all of the rows over here, and I just rerun my code, it's like, oh, cool, we can like actually interact with this website and get everything and all of that good stuff. And so, yeah, I was like, okay, awesome. I got my company list and, a bunch of other stuff that I could use if I really wanted to look into these other, metrics of like, oh, looking at all the mid-sized companies or big companies or small companies or whatever. And in this case, I didn't really need anything too fancy. I just wanted the list of these companies. And let's say, NVIDIA is doing pretty hot right now, I'd say, with all of the stocks. But this is where, so that's where I got it from for the Forbes list. But now I'm like, okay, let's try and make things easier in LinkedIn. And so I found that you don't just have to like just scrape data. You can actually, as Callie mentioned, input stuff into it. And so what I did was, because I got a little tired of putting in my LinkedIn login like every time, you can actually send information into Selenium. So over here, I can fill out my login information, which I'm not going to expose. And it can actually also click buttons to sign in. So boom, here's my LinkedIn and stuff. And once I'm in, I was able to do a filter of, okay, I want all these companies that I just got from my list, and I want to find all the people who went to my college. And again, just going through the list, NVIDIA, it's going to load it up. And then boom, I have all these people that I can then connect with, which, you can do a couple of other things with once you get that list. But it just makes it so much easier than having to filter through every single person, every single company. It's like just making my life a lot easier. And yeah, so that was kind of my networking on crack, as I called it during my recruiting season. So yeah, building my data source and doing that scraping with the help of Selenium and Beautiful Soup. And then, yeah, the demo. And so one other project real quick is I wanted to get something for my friend's birthday, and my friend has a ton of games on this thing called Steam, and he has like over 1,000 on his wish list. And so I had to take a bit more of a creative approach on this website, because this is a website that has all of the games, but the thing is that it doesn't load the full HTML for the whole site, because I think it kind of crashed if it tried to load like 1,000 games at one time. So what I did in the Selenium in order for it to actually get the information is I had it scroll down, which is something you can do, which I find is super cool. Like you can just have it scroll down and then scrape a segment of the site, scroll it down, get a segment of the site, continue. Oh, cool. So it's like for loops, but for navigating a website. And then from there, built in all of these tags and stuff, information about the games that he had on his list. all of that stuff. And my end goal of this is I wanted to make a chatbot that could then look through and tell them like, oh, based on like what mood you're in, you might want to play this game or that game. And then my OpenAI costs started adding up because I was not really good at the compressing it, and that's kind of something I'm still learning, including in my current rotation. So I put that on hold and I sent him a gift card instead. But it was a fun project to explore of like, can I train OpenAI on my friend's game data? So some of the few projects that I've kind of dabbled in with all of this. But then you might be wondering, okay, we have all this cool data, we've mined and everything. Okay, but what's next? And it's kind of just answering your question, and that can take a lot of different forms. So graphs is kind of like a really common one for when you're publishing papers and stuff. This one on the left, it's what I got from some of the data I did when I was doing my GPT-3 thesis. And then the one on the right is when I used modeling that's used for diseases like viral infections. And I was like, what if we applied that, but like to viral memes? So I don't have time to get into the math of that because it was evolutionary game theory stuff, but it was pretty fun. Some of it can be used for business decisions. So this was based off of data I scraped from Google search for a startup I was working with. And so the light blue line is the company I was working with. And we are trying to see, okay, how do we boost up? Can we see if the changes we make to the website influence the Google search results? And this one, it was like, okay, we're pretty up there. And then this one was like a complete like battle of like, okay, let's try and change stuff and see how it evolves over time, and kind of messy, but cool way of seeing how do small changes influence the data to actually see, are the changes we're making, do they actually have an impact on our web traffic and that sort of thing. And of course,
That's so
chatbots
cool.
is like a pretty hot thing.
Did they end up implementing anything based on your research after that?
Yeah, because we were trying like different segments of the website, adding in more locations relevant to Hawaii, adding in some like blog posts and that sort of thing. And so this was kind of our way of confirming, okay, did all the time we spend writing those blog posts, did that actually make a difference?
It looks like it did.
It made a huge difference because it was like we had the rankings from this, and we also had Google SEO and just a lot of really good metrics confirming, okay, cool, we didn't like waste a whole day writing stuff about things you can do in Hawaii and that sort of
Very
thing.
cool.
And then chatbots, as I mentioned, pretty hot stuff right now as far as that goes. And of course, websites, interactive data visualization. There's like a library called DJ3 or D3 in JavaScript. I haven't really touched too much of that, but just thought I'd mention because I think it's pretty cool. But yeah, just to recap, it's 3 basic steps of find your question, find your data source, answer your question. And just kind of in the like formal data pipeline way, it's, you're practicing data sourcing of defining a clear question and hypothesis of a data set that can be used to answer it, and just, using real data. Because I think that's the biggest thing is in a lot of classes, they're like, they give you the data, but finding good data in itself, it's a really valuable skill to have. And working with real world data, because real world data is weird, but that's like the fun of it, it's like you don't really know what you're going to get. And then data cleaning, cleaning it up, connecting it to other sources. Like there's lots of great data sets on Kaggle, to connect things to, and investigating. And then, sharing your findings, data presentation, like actually being able to communicate, this is what I found. And, graphs I feel like are really popular because visuals are always, tend to communicate a lot better than just text and words and, just tables and stuff. But yeah, and seeing where things go from there. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have on the kind of crash course part. Again, not to get too technical on that stuff, because again, GPT-3 can do a lot of, or GPT-4o, whichever model they're on now, they can do a lot of hand holding on the technical end. I think it's more important of really refining down that process though, of like, how do we investigate, growing that curiosity and, connecting all kinds of different libraries to see like, how do you answer your question? So yeah.
Yay! I love that. All right, so let's open the floor for questions. Who has a question for Sara? Go ahead and unmic and ask.
Yeah, I have a question for you. So I've used Selenium before, but I've never used Beautiful Soup. I know that you can use Selenium to scrape websites, but sometimes it gets pretty tedious, like you said, to find what you're looking for. How is Beautiful Soup different, and what does it help you with?
I think the easiest thing with Beautiful Soup is we're able to refer to. I've tried some Selenium, and honestly, it looks like some of the XMLs or stuff. It got kind of also weird, or XPaths. But with Beautiful Soup, I think because it's like really specifically built on getting the HTML stuff, we're able to parse through it. Like the libraries that it has built in within it of like, okay, we're getting this segment of the HTML. It's been a lot more user friendly, I found, for compared to when I'm using Selenium for it. So I found that combining the two of using Selenium to get to the HTML part and then using Beautiful Soup, which is I think a lot better equipped to actually get HTML and like read through it. I think that's been a really powerful combination for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you.
I do have a question.
Mhm.
Hi, Sarah. My name is Jay. And I just want to know if I want to I just want to know how close or relevant uh data data engineering is compared to AI. If I want to break into AI, is data engineering my first step to learn?
It's a good question. So I think personally, data engineering, it's not necessarily the same go as like in AI space, because AI tends to use, I know they do a lot more of like modeling, and data engineering, it's more of like connecting the data into kind of the whole pipeline process. But at the same time, and this is coming from my experience in my rotation, where I've gone from data engineering and being more hands-on with the data to like the more modeling end, I personally think having a really strong foundation in data engineering is super, super important and not really being emphasized as much right now, because, everyone wants to go like, oh, cool, math models and all of that without fully understanding the context of the data. And right now, I've been really lucky in my current rotation at Moody's, where I've gone from being really, really hands-on to the data with now trying to give it to a model. And sometimes, there are weird abnormalities in the data and what the model spits out that I'm like, oh, because I've worked with the data hands-on, I know why this is happening and how we can course correct it and such. Whereas I've seen people who are familiar with like the modeling aspect, but not so much on the data source, kind of struggle to figure that out, because at the end of the day, it's like, your model is only going to be as good as the quality of your data. And I feel like data engineering and that hands-on, actually going through the weeds of like, trying to clean it up and stuff, getting your hands dirty with that, I feel like it provides, a really important skill set that can be transferred to AI engineering, which may not necessarily be the same as having the exact skill set for AI engineering, but foundationally, it's been really helpful for me.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
I have another question for you.
Yeah.
So I've done some web scraping and stuff with Selenium, and I run into some issues with like ethics of web scraping and gathering data. How do you determine like which data you're allowed to gather? What kind of checks do you do before you start grabbing any data?
I mean, honestly, because a lot of these I've done it, I feel like on a very, like, it's kind of that whole personal use versus commercial use, I feel like that's kind of, and of course it's kind of hand wavy, because like that's kind of a thing on a large scale right now of like ethics of what are you using this for and stuff. And for me personally, I'm just like, I'm using this for like, at the time I was using it for my funny little school assignments, and now I'm just like, I'm just using it to satisfy my curiosity. So I personally don't see much of a harm, because I personally don't feel like I'm profiting off of what I'm using it for, because that's where I feel like a lot of those concerns tend to be, especially when it gets into like, using someone's writing or using someone's art and selling that as like a product, or of those models, where I think that concern arises. So I think it's less of like the scraping in general and more of like, what are you putting it towards, right? Because yeah, the scraping, like some of them are like, don't scrape it at all. And obviously using the API source is usually going to be like a much better way of getting the data when you can. But then sometimes there are some APIs that are really decrepit, or yeah, like deprecated, or the documentation is just really bad to go through, where I'm just like, I could just kind of grab this part that I need here. But obviously, whatever official avenues there are to use are always like, really good. I think it really does come down to what are you using this for, and as far as sourcing the data properly, which is a problem I notice a lot of chatbots are having, of like, where is the data coming from? Because it's so black box, they're not really able to provide a solid answer for this. Whereas if it's just me doing it, I'm like, oh, I got this data off of here, and maybe they just don't have an API of getting that information. But I can say, oh, I got it from here.
I want that to be the answer. I want to be like, I can just go and grab anything and use it for what I want, as long as it's a personal project. But like at the same time, I see all these things that are saying like, you shouldn't use any automation tools to like grab these this information, and a lot of websites have that, or have like a robot docs text file that says that you shouldn't be taking this stuff, but I find that it's like hard to find that information. Like a lot of the websites don't publish that. So is your stance like just take it and then ask for forgiveness if they don't tell you to stop?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I got into this before, again, this whole like scraping ethics and thing really became a thing, you know, because I took this class back in like 2020, 2021 era before chatbots and widespread scraping, you know, really was a thing, and what exactly are like the ethical implications of it. And I think it's something I've been following very heavily just because, you know, obviously I want to be able to give credit where credit's due and
I
with
have more
knowing how much of a
context
black
on the
box.
ethical concerns. Can you give me a few examples of what the ethical concerns are?
Yeah, I mean, right now, even there's like been a lot of controversy over social media platforms like, say, Meta and Instagram, and even Adobe right now. I think Adobe got into a huge controversy recently about using people's art. It wasn't clear in their terms of service if they were using people's art to train their generative AI image called Firefly. And that's been like a really big concern for artists because, you know, if you put in someone's name, it can generate something in that art style. You know, in a way, it does kind of feel like it's stealing from them and not properly compensating them in some way. So there's been a lot of talk of like, okay, how do we use this data, compensation of that? You know, if you're using it as a product and you're selling it and making money off of essentially what is this person's work, you know, what are the implications here and there and stuff. And again, it's interesting because I got into in the time before that was really much of a concern where everything on the web was kind of free game. But now, you know, as Dan has mentioned, there are like, you know, robot TXT, don't scrape it, like this information and that sort of thing. And it's kind of still like, you know, there's not really any fine defined like, oh, this is what you should do, this is what you shouldn't do sort of thing. And again, that's why I'm like, this is more of just kickstarting into exploring the process itself. But as opposed to, you know, when you're trying to launch, say, a business or something, that's where you have to really take those kind of principles into account, at least for me. Because again, this is just more of exploration, seeing if, you know, are you even interested in working with data and that sort of thing? Because, you know, again, lots of data sources out there that you can just pull from. But for me, I was like, I just want to, you know, use data that I find is personally interesting. And again, for personal projects that I just want to explore and learn different libraries from, as opposed to the same kind of, you know, CSVs that you can get from like the government or something that are kind of boring, at least in my opinion. But yeah, I think it really comes down, it's going to be like an ongoing debate within the tech world.
Yeah,
Dan,
I
maybe if
appreciate
it's
that.
just for personal learning, maybe pick something that has like a public API. And if you want a web scrape, maybe if it's the same data, you already know that they're like okay with you practicing web scraping on the same data that they're giving you in an API. Maybe that would be more ethical for like a personal project
No,
to learn.
I appreciate it. I just wanted to get your perspective, Sarah, from a data engineer and see what you do and what steps you take. And it makes me feel better that I'm like not, because I'm always like scared when I'm getting on a website and I'm like, am I allowed to take this stuff? Am I allowed to be looking at all of this? Even though like you can go on the website, right, and look at it yourself. But, you know, still, I don't know. Like I said, I just get scared. So I feel better. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. I get that as well. And I think especially now, you know, in this current like age where it's like, you know, been a real like, again, these are all really, really recent issues. For me, I was just like, I just like cool data and just getting random stuff. Like I got prices of like, what is it? Back when graphics cards were really hard to come by, I got like prices of different graphics cards and was trying to predict when those prices would like drop or when it would go on sale, and then just like, you know, grab it before it got sold out back in the COVID era. So,
Oh, cool.
you know,
I almost wrote
all
a
kinds of
Selenium
different stuff.
script to automatically purchase a graphics card when they were really hard to find.
Yeah.
This is how I know data's not for me, because it's very cool that you guys are doing this, but I have zero interest.
Yeah, it's all interest driven. Like that's how I got on this path to begin with. I was like, you know, working with data, and even like the Moody's data now, I'm like, it's been really, really cool seeing like, oh, this is like all about the big, like there are lots of companies out there and here's all their data, you know.
I think
So
it is.
also, Sara is in the rotational program for Moody. So if you guys have any questions about like breaking into tech, what a rotational program is like, what being associate software engineer is like. I'm sure Sara would be happy to answer those questions too, if they're not data specific.
Yeah, what is a
That's-
rotational program?
Yeah, I was going to ask the same question. Like, what you mentioned, you're doing a rotations and you're doing a software engineer rotation. I'm Marcy, by the way. And hi. And I was just curious, like, what that looks like right now and what you're doing.
Yeah. So I mean, it's really funny again. I'm in the software engineering rotation, and I did like one rotation that was like kind of software engineering, and then just kind of changed gears altogether. But what that looks like is every 6 months we change teams, and what they do is they send out a whole kind of spreadsheet of here are all these different operating units in Moody's. Here's the team. Here's the tech stack. Here's a little bit about the product they're working on, and we can kind of rank them and talk to the managers to learn more information. With my program, it's called Matter. It's the technical rotation program. And it's kind of nice because we have like a network of about like 20 other people in my cohort. And now the incoming cohort, they doubled that to 50. So the program's been growing a lot. But it's nice because I can ask like other people in the cohort, oh, hey, I've been interested in, say the digital insights team. What do you guys do there? Or with Callie's team on data engineering. And every month we have like a few people from our cohort do a whole presentation of like, this is what I've been doing in my rotation. Here's what I've learned and that sort of thing. And it's just a really great program if you're still trying to figure out what exactly you want to do. Because kind of what I mentioned before was I was kind of on like the software engineering track, and a lot of data positions kind of require a master's program. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll just stick with software engineering. And fortunately, through the Moody's program, they were like, oh, we have all of these different roles you could try. They have data science, data engineering, back-end engineering, front end, and all of that. And I was like, I really don't want to touch front end. Please don't give me that. Please give me this data engineering one. And so my trajectory for that was I started off in back-end engineering because I like to say I'm formally trained as a software engineer in like, what I did in coursework, and then found out about the data engineering team, rotated there, really, really liked it and begged them to let me stay for another 6 months. And then was like, okay, well, there's a lot of cool Gen AI stuff out there and I really want to try a different team. And then after that year, I'm now on a different team at the moment. So
cool.
Yeah, that's what it's been like. Highly recommend, honestly, if you're still trying to figure out what path do I want to do in tech, it's a great way of like changing positions without having to leave your job.
Do you know when the applications are up/closed for the next year?
Yeah, they open up around, I want to say like August, September, like that's kind of peak recruiting season.
Okay.
And I was actually doing interviews for it. So I know they kind of close around like late February or March, but honestly, the sooner that you can get in, the better. I think like it's been a really, really popular thing nowadays. And that's part of why they had to double the cohort, because it works really well both ways for both the participants and the managers. So yeah. Highly recommend.
Yeah, I was on the other side of things as a rotational manager. And honestly, I feel like the Matter people, that's what the program's called, were my favorite people to work with at Moody's because I loved the enthusiasm. I loved that like they joined the team and then it was like hit the ground running. And so, yeah, I always enjoyed whenever we had Matter people on our team so that way we could get some work done quickly.
Yay.
All right, other questions for Sara?
And look, if Callie is vouching for you guys, that's all the endorsement I need.
Yeah, everyone but Dan. You can't have him. I'm making the joke because Dan's about to run my next cohort for Coding with Callie. So
oh, that's awesome.
yes. But anywho, yes, other questions.
Yeah, I have a question. So how'd you found your first job, Sarah?
I mean, from that LinkedIn invite thing that I sent, a lot of the networking of like, hey, I'm a current student at Dartmouth. What's your company like? And that sort of thing. And a lot of it was really interesting actually, because I encountered a lot of people who also kind of had that same software engineering to data pathway I did, because honestly, I was like, I felt kind of like the only one in that boat in my current back at Dartmouth in my class, because a lot of people were in the software engineering or they were like on data and more on like the social sciences side of it. So a lot of that like alumni networking, looking at what networks I had access to. I went to Grace Hopper, which was the kind of female underrepresented tech conference as well. And that was a really great opportunity, especially now that they're back in person. And yeah, just really showing, I think, a lot of curiosity of learning more about like what the company is like, what kind of tech they use, now I think the really hot question is like, how are they trying to incorporate AI into their business? That sort of thing. Yeah, just kind of shooting my shot everywhere. And also looking outside of big tech, because big tech was a really big thing at Dartmouth, and I feel like it's a big thing overall. But personally for me, I found a lot of really good luck in areas that are like tech adjacent, like Moody's, which, you know, it's more fintech. And I previously worked at like PNC, which is a bank, Bank of America and all that, and just seeing how do they handle tech differently than, you know, big tech. And because nowadays it's like tech's everywhere, it's like huge. And I feel like really broadening my horizons on what industries are there out there really helped me grow my network and also just have a better understanding of how the industry works today.
Very cool. Sarah, I have a
you.
question. What do you notice, if anything, because I know with the Matter cohort, it's a mix of like CS degree, boot camp, self-taught.
Mhm.
Do you notice any difference between those groups, or is it person specific? And like, what advice would you give for like those different groups breaking into tech?
Yeah, honestly, I've noticed like I feel like what really matters at the end of the day is how much you're willing to learn. And again, just going back to like curiosity and passion, because again, that's how I ended up on this is like I thought I wanted to be a software engineer and I was trying to get into this lab at Dartmouth and they were like, oh, do a project, do a personal website or do an API. And it took me like 3 years to realize, oh, maybe the reason why I'm not completing this application isn't because I'm like lazy or unfocused or undiagnosed ADHD, but maybe I just don't actually want to do it, you know? And then when they opened up a data science position, I was like, boom, here you go. Here's my project. And I was like, oh, this might be something I want to do actually. And so in Matter too, I feel like because a lot of people, regardless of your background, it's like, you know, you're interested in some tech stack or some project or, you know, something related to what you're doing in the rotation because there's so many options to choose from. And I feel like that really ends up blending well when you're on a brand new team, zero knowledge, no clue what's going on, and then going through that process like 4 times. It's kind of jarring at first, you know, having everything that's familiar and then rebuilding it from square one. But I found that curiosity to like learn and grow and meet with other people on the team. That's really helped me a lot, especially transitioning even from my familiar data engineering team that I was with to my current brand new team. It's like, whoa, LLMs, like, you know, there's all this deep learning and all these new like pipelines to go through. How do we deploy the product actually and rebuilding that from scratch? But just kind of embracing all of that newness, I feel like has really brought me very far in this rotation. And it's something I've noticed that's worked in both, regardless of your background. It's like you're doing tech because you want to do it. Hopefully, if you're spending so much time and, you know, however much money, it's like, you know, hopefully it's because you actually like it.
Okay, I love that, and that's great advice. I was just on a call with Marcy before this, and I said the same thing about curiosity. So I'm glad that you said the same thing. What's next for you because your rotation's ending? Also, if anyone else has a question instead of me, feel free to tell me to shut up. But I'm curious, your rotation's ending soon. Do you know what team
Yeah.
you're going to be
Oh,
on?
August is going to be really exciting actually because my rotation ends beginning of August and
Okay.
fingers crossed, you know, final placement. I've mentioned it multiple times of which team I want to go back to, confirm with the manager, you know, you might know him.
Yes.
And yeah. So that's kind of, you know, fingers crossed that all works and I'll actually be like officially data engineer because it's kind of funny saying I'm my official position is software engineering rotation and I'm like, yeah, but I haven't touched software engineering since like 2 years ago. And then actually in the middle of August I'm going to be starting a part-time master's program with Carnegie Mellon because they have a part-time one online for business analytics, which is like if an MBA and data science had a baby. Because one of the things I really love about this whole data thing is being able to use data and help out startups and small businesses that really have a lot of data to leverage and may not necessarily know the right way to go about it. And I've just been kind of doing it from whatever I can find of like, oh yeah, basic SEO or looking at data trends and stuff. And now I'm like, okay, I really want to go like more in depth with it. And it's a nice program because I can go there in person on the campus, but then also do like remote classes and keep my job at Moody's because I really like it there right now. So
I love that. That sounds so great. Congratulations.
yeah, thank you. Yeah,
I
August
haven't-
will be exciting.
Oh, that sounds fabulous. I have another question for you. I guess, so my undergraduate degree is in finance, and I worked at Standard & Poor's as a financial analyst for a couple of years before I went into marketing. And obviously now I'm into software engineering, but Python was the language that I learned in, and it's where I feel most comfortable. I'm learning JavaScript to just kind of get full stack, but I am very interested in data. I geek out about it. I just love it. I love working with it. I love doing web scrapers. I made a web scraper to scrape Poshmark for a pair of shoes that are,
Heck yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm just iterating that project. But what would you suggest if someone wanted to get into data engineering, and I plan on getting my master's degree, but not this year, probably, and wait until next year. Should I start as a SWE, or look into a program like what you're doing with Moody's, or what would you suggest?
I mean, yeah, programming like Moody's right now is really helpful, because I think the one hard thing with data is a lot of these programs really want like people with a master's degree.
Right.
And it's like, now having kind of gone through recruiting process and seeing, like, I think the biggest thing of why they want a master's degree is there's so many undergrad programs out there that don't incorporate you actually using real world data, because it's like, either if you may have used it in a thesis, but that's not necessarily a given. And I feel like that's such a crucial part of like transitioning from like school and that's those skill sets to an actual industry job, is again, real world data. It's really cool. It's also really weird, and really getting your hands into that. That's where I feel like that's why a lot of places are like, oh, we want a master's degree. Because that's one thing I found when I was doing recruiting. I was like, oh, I need to go with the software engineering route. And the other thing I've noticed too is I've heard a lot of data scientists say this, where they like people with a technical background going into that field, because it's like, again, even if the data, there's like these human aspects of it, and that's part of like understanding it, there's also the technical aspects of being able to handle the data correctly in terms of just cleaning it up and moving it around and stuff. I think for my position right now with Moody's, one thing I did a lot of was studying up on SQL and like data warehousing and stuff. And one of the nice things is Moody's actually paid for us to get certified with like cloud computing and data engineering. Actually, everyone else in my cohort did the software development one, and I was like, can I do the data engineering one actually? Because I don't think I'm going to go much into software development. But with SQL, it's like how do you actually get from like big data, because that's where all those things of like efficiency and stuff really come into play, depending on how big your data set is. And Callie might be familiar with like how long our product would take sometimes to load. It's like there's like millions of rows or something.
Right.
And yeah, but honestly, I'm gonna say Python is like your super best bet. I know there are people who are like diehard by R, or people who are like Tableau or something. Python by far the most versatile, depending on like regardless of what you want to do in data. It's really strong with right now at Moody's, we're working with PySpark and Databricks, and it's like mostly it was basically Python with some SQL inserted into it, but mostly Python. There's Python for machine learning. There's Python for data visualization, which it's kind of like getting there. Like I know some people, I'm like, okay, you kind of win on that front, but there are some Python for data visualization, but especially on the machine learning front, it's like so much out there. Like everyone's developing for Python, regardless of what you want to do, and especially with the data stuff. I'm just like, yeah, Python is my ride or die. Like I eat, sleep, breathe Python.
Same.
Yeah,
I'm doing a hackathon right now, and it's all in JavaScript, and I'm like itsy bitsy bit, just a little bit of JavaScript knowledge, so I can't participate or help in that way. So there's a machine learning portion of it that we're going to have AI incorporated into it. So that's what I'm doing right now, and I'm really enjoying cleaning the data and getting together and putting the models together. So it's a lot of fun.
Yay, that's awesome. And that's a really important thing, is you're actually interacting with the data, because again, you're just working with the funny models and you're like, oh, why is it spitting out something weird? And then you look at your spreadsheet and it's like, oh, that's why. Like that's such a huge foundational skill that I feel like really, really needs to be emphasized more, especially as like these models are ballooning up with data that we don't know where it's coming from and stuff.
For sure. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I love it. I knew you were going to be a great guest. Any other questions?
Yeah,
I again, have a question.
Just to reiterate. Yeah,
sorry.
Go for it.
Hi, Sarah.
Oh, I was just gonna say, if you have anything you want to ask off the record, again, feel free to slide into my LinkedIn DMs after. But yeah, shoot, question.
So out of curiosity, do you have any recommendations for resources, somebody who's new to data engineering, data science, that wants to learn more?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of great free resources. Like I'm personally a big fan of stuff that like actually lets you run the code, because you can watch YouTube videos and try to absorb the information, but there's only really so much there. So I think as far as like for me, it was less of like, oh, there's a specific curriculum for it, and more of like, okay, I know beautiful soup exists, so I'm gonna just try and scrape this website for fun. Which kind of going back to like ethics of stuff websites do or don't. I was just like, look, I just want to get better at this, so I'm just gonna, grab whatever. So I think it really comes down to like knowing what skills you want to practice instead of like, oh, I'm gonna follow this step by step thing. Like I just wanted to lay out all the tools that I personally have used that I found like have been the most beneficial. So I think it would be, try scrape some website for fun, build your own CSV thing. And then as far as experimenting with transformations, I mentioned earlier the NLTK library. It's a really great way of saying, okay, now that we have all of this text data, especially, how do you actually do stuff with it? And it's like the articles are changing all the time. So it's like, I can't really recommend a specific like channel or something that I found has done data. Cause it's like, honestly, I just kind of just Google it as I go instead of like following the set thing. I'm just like, oh, actually I think one of it was, I was trying to translate stuff from like Japanese to English. And I was like, okay, best, libraries for that won't be super scuffed or something. And just going off of that, which is why I really wanted to stress kind of the emphasis of leading with a question as opposed to like, oh, these are the technical skills you need to build your project sort of thing that I feel like a lot of software engineering tends to lean on, of this infrastructure or something. I'm just like, libraries, there are new ones popping up for Python all the time. Just go wild.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah. And also, I'm happy to assist if there are any fun little projects that you have, like, going on that you're like, I don't know where to start with this. Like, sometimes it's just planning out that roadmap or figuring out where to start. That's always like, I feel like the daunting part. But
I mean,
yeah.
honestly, it's kind of seeming like we need like a data workshop for coding with Callie led by Sara, no?
That would be so cool.
I don't know. It's just what I'm hearing, it seems like.
Yes, for sure.
There's a lot of data enthusiasts in here.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know. I feel like the odd man out over here. I'm like, I just want to deploy stuff,
Just so funny because I tried doing deployment for one of my internships and I was like, this is so tedious. Get me out.
Yeah, I don't know why I like it. To be honest, I'm like, I question myself daily. All right.
We all like different things, and that's been the beauty of the rotation is I got to try out the deployment again. I was like, cheers. So, great team and all. Like, again, fantastic people at Moody's, including Callie, who I miss very dearly from the KYC side.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, Sara, thank you so much for joining us. This has been so great. And yes, please reach out to Sara if you have any questions. She's great at chatting with everybody and getting back to everybody. Sara, do you have anything that you want to plug or tell anybody about?
Honestly, not at the moment. I'm currently building something with this kind of, it's not really an incubator, it's called Build Space. But it's basically this kind of program where they give you like a toolkit of like how to launch your idea. And I feel like it really echoes a lot of the things that Coding with Callie likes to stress of like building in public. Because their whole thing is like, okay, how do we actually getting user feedback and testing and all of that? And it's kind of one of the, it's a program I like to use to just like try and kickstart random ideas that I have and actually sitting down and trying to see if I can build an audience out of it. So highly recommend checking out the stuff that they have in there on their YouTube channel and everything, because I think it's really great, especially if you have, data idea that you want to see how much further you can go with it. So not something I made, just want to stress it's just a program I've been a part of in the past. I think they're really cool.
Sorry, I have a
Awesome.
question.
Yeah, can you say what it is again?
It's called Build Space.
Build Space. Okay, very cool.
Yeah.
We'll have to check that out. All right, and then the shameless Coding with Callie plug. Make sure we have a build in public cohort starting in August, and then Dan will be running our deploy in public second cohort. So if anybody's interested, I know Marcy already joined the build in public, yay. But yeah, feel free to sign up and it's gonna be super fun. Cool. Well, anybody have anything to say before we close it out a little bit early today?
Wait, sorry, I never joined a cohort. What is the cohort about?
So Jay, you are currently in this cohort of the Deploy in Public challenge.
Okay, yeah.
We will be doing a second cohort in August, and then we will also be doing a different one called Build in Public, where we will be building a full stack application with JavaScript with TypeScript React on the front end, SJS on the back end. It's the one that I ran, I think, before you joined Coding with Callie. But if you're interested in building a project in public with a group of people, I would recommend signing up for that one.
Okay, cool.
Very cool.
I don't have a question, but I would just like to introduce myself to Sara and Callie and everyone here. I'm Kristen, and I just finished a full stack boot camp in February.
Congratulations.
And thank you.
Yeah.
And yeah, I have a social science background. I teach sociology, so I am interested in data. And I hadn't really thought about going in that direction, but I am interested in data. It's from a different perspective, a social science perspective, but yeah, like collecting data, analyzing it, putting into a graph really interests me. So this has given me something to think about. And yeah, I'm just, trying to explore my options and break into the software engineering world.
Nice. Well, I just want to say
Welcome.
that data and the social sciences really play well together, because kind of in my degree, it was like CS modified with quantitative social science. Because the thing is, usually for the QSS major is they do data stuff and it's paired with the social science, because it's not just these technical skills of data, but how can you apply it in the broader context. So the fact that you have a background in that is actually really, really strong. Because again, key thing I want to emphasize, technical skills are one thing, but actually understanding your data and where it's coming from is like really, really huge. So props to you for making that switch. I modified mine because I was like, oh, actually econ and psych and sociology, that's not really my thing. I just want to do it on my fun little interest, and they let me somehow. But yeah, it plays well really together. So I feel like that's a really good thing, depending on your background, So yeah, congrats on finishing the boot camp.
Thank you.
I'm very excited to see what project you're to come up with now, because I feel like the curiosity is like the biggest driver of like us learning new things and getting into new projects. So the fact that this sparked something in you and now you can go build something that combines your worlds, it's really cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, go ahead.
Sorry. I have one more comment, Sarah. I have to say, it looks like Dartmouth is very good school. You guys are teaching the latest technology, React. I'm talking about. My school doesn't teach us React. They teach us C++, which is pretty outdated.
Oh, we had to do one of our classes in C, so I feel you, man.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm just saying it was one of the classes that we did React. It wasn't all React, like.
Yeah,
so.
but that's still pretty that's pretty up to date. Yeah. I'm gonna have to I'm gonna have to do my master's degree in Dartmouth as well if I can get into it.
Yeah, I mean, I really like the program there, and because, just shameless plug, it was so liberal artsy, I could do both the tech stuff and the social science part, which I feel like has been really, really strong for me in pursuing all kinds of fun data projects. Because some of the ones I showed weren't even in the CS department. I did it in they had the film department, math department, geography department, and I was just like, yeah, you have data in your course, so I'm going to take it. Linguistics department, it was just like everything. I was like, hey, can I do these fun little data projects with you, with my professors? And they were really, really supportive. So yeah.
I feel like every I did my master's in linguistics, and we did this whole study about different dialects in Spanish, and I had to sit there and trace maps as part of my master's thesis, and maybe that's what turned me off from data, because I had to trace hundreds of maps. I was
gosh.
Yeah, people drew maps of where they thought that game where you have the United States, and then you draw pictures on the states of stereotypes from the states. Has everybody done that? No.
Yeah.
Or you're Kentucky Fried Chicken or something, what you think about. Well, we did that with Spanish speaking countries, but it was what do people sound like from these Spanish speaking countries? But with Spanish speakers, it's what do they think of different Spanish speakers' accents? And then we had to trace and correlate all of it was not fun. Yeah, I bet you would have found a way to automate it that didn't require you to trace hundreds of maps.
Yeah, I was in a pretty good computational linguistics class where we were looking at, actually, I think it was also Spanish. Spanish has been a pretty popular one, actually, because it's in letters instead of like, say, characters or something. So you'd be surprised how much is out there when it comes to like Spanish and linguistics and code.
Yeah. So social sciences, it all fits. It all fits together. All right. Cool. Well, I will see everybody next week. Have a great week. And thank you again so much, Sarah.
Yeah, thanks again for having me,
Bye,
Callie. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thanks for having
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Thanks for
Bye.
having us.